I thought it would be nice to do a video today about a couple of things. One of the main things is about sovereign being, and that leads on to integrating the koshas into effortless being. So I know I've spoken to people about sovereign being in the past, and it's not always the easiest thing to accept that we are sovereign. I know it certainly wasn't easy for me to accept, coming from a Christian background, and also having a mentor for many years, although having a mentor was a valuable thing for me at that time, and I would never change anything about it because she was a very, well, I say she still is an amazing lady, very powerful, very clear with her pointings, and it helped me quicken the process of realizing my true nature and, getting to grips with the true meaning of Christianity. Accepting one's own sovereignty can be tricky if we have a lofty idea of what sovereignty is. So if you just allow me to explain an act of sovereignty that I think most people can relate to. So I live in the UK, as you can possibly tell by my accent. And in the UK, we have miles per hour. And I know that some parts of the world, they have kilometres, but we do have miles per hour. Now, where I live in the UK, there are different miles per hour depending on different circumstances. So if the road is near to a school or near some elderly people's residence, we are told to drive at 20 miles an hour. Most roads are 30. You do get the odd road that can be 40, and then it continues to go up to 70, but 70 is the maximum. It is the national speed limit. Now, most cars, if not all, have the capacity to go over 100 miles an hour. But there are speed limits within the area that I live, and with most areas, in built-up areas, rural built-up areas. So an example of sovereignty in this situation is that if I'm driving on a 30 mile per hour road, I have the sovereignty to press my foot harder on the accelerating pedal or to release it to go lower than 30 miles per hour. That is an act of sovereignty. Nobody has the power. There's no external person or thing inside the body that's going to make the body do something other than what I want it to do. That is an act of sovereignty. Of course, there are consequences for actions. So, again, this all depends on each individual. But certainly from here, if I'm driving past a school and I see it's a time when, you've got little children coming out and sometimes they don't look, they just run out into the road, I wouldn't need a speed limit to determine the speed that I do. I would automatically drop it down to 20 or less, if it, depending on what's happening, what's appearing. But again, that's my sovereignty. It doesn't mean that everybody else has to do that, nor does everybody do that. So if that can be understood, I know it is in the relative and it is in the dual. It's in the dual sense, but it doesn't really matter where we look at this. We are sovereign, because if I think of somebody could bring me some information and I may not agree or I may not believe what they're saying for different reasons, the person who's brought me the information and says, I want you to believe me, they cannot make me. They can possibly influence me or inspire me. And again, That's sovereignty, because we know what makes us, what resonates with us, and we know what doesn't. But there is nobody on this planet that has got the power to make me think a thought or make me believe something I don't want to believe. And that stands true for everyone. Again, I know there's circumstances, I know that there's loyalties. Sometimes we think, oh, this is such and such person, we should believe them, but that it still comes down to sovereignty. So how do we address things that are coming up in everyday life that we don't like, and we didn't choose them? We didn't sovereignly choose fear, anger, judgments. Well, it's to recognize that you are a sovereign being. One way to do it, which I find really useful, so for example, I do not recall choosing fear. I didn't say, right, I'm going to choose fear. But at some point, fear was a predominant energy that would just automatically come up. And it got to the point where I was like, I'm not fearful of this thing that's in front of me. So where's this fear coming from? And that then brought up anger and frustration because I couldn't pinpoint it. It didn't have a meaning. And so through self-inquiry, self-investigation, through listening to things that resonated, listening to intuition, understanding different concepts of limitation, just from homework really, the realization was, yeah, I chose this fear. And it was, I can't remember how I did it. I think I used Lester Levinston's work. But I've always, whenever I've used the letting go, I've never had the concept that I am holding all of these energies and I need to let them go. It was more of, could I let go of identifying with this energy or this aspect or this tendency? And so it helped immensely because you become more in touch with intuition, and it kind of cleans up perception and it sorts quite a few things out. So I found that really useful prior to meeting with David Bingham, and then of course joining a community or becoming a part of a community of self-realized beings. I found that extremely useful. Prior to Lester Levinston's work, I did a lot of work on personal development, using the mind to create the heart's desire. And then you realize that it creates what you want, but it doesn't give you the ultimate freedom and the happiness, because the underlying consents to fear, lack and limitation are really running the show. And so when you get something that you think is going to make you happy, it relieves you of the desire, but then not long after, that unhappiness starts running again. And that's what I hear a lot of people who I talk to, what they seem to be having that push and pull with. Well, it is fantastic to listen to YouTube videos. It is fantastic to join communities, but that's only a small part. This integrating and embodying, even though that's all part of the dance, there was a consent here to come down into a human body and play the human game. And the game is a beautiful game when we remove lack and limitation, when we start to see through those filters that there is no lack and there is no limitation, and it's just a case of integrating that. And that's because the mind works on repetition. We have to keep on repeating the action. And that can be constantly declining invitations. It can be changing the language. And repetition doesn't mean a million times. It means more than once. There are some things that have fallen away after saying it 3 times because it was a repeated word. Affirmed, I withdraw my consent from this thing, or there is an awareness of a tendency to identify with this thing. It's an impersonal awareness, and I withdraw my consent, thank you very much, or I reclaim my power. It is about depersonalizing the language. That helps. Even if you don't have the direct experience of feeling like a person, because not everybody has that experience, and people can really be in unity consciousness, and that's the predominant state of being. However, it's the language that can really shift the energy from the old consents and programs into experiencing freedom. So sovereign being is who you are. If you're open to that and you can accept that, it changes the game very quickly, because we realize that the power is within, even though I don't really want any non-dual police coming on saying there is no within and without, but the power is ultimately you. And it's your movie. You're the director of your movie. And so if something keeps showing up, it's because we've got the script running for that thing to show up. Another really good way, if you're open to it, is the mind mirror. So if you see something in somebody that pushes your buttons, or you don't like, or you get uncomfortable with, it's to be honest to thyself. What is it that I am commenting, describing, or measuring in this person? What is it? Be brutally honest, and then look for that thing in you. You might not be able to find the exact thing, but you can kind of see what button's being pushed here. I can see unworthiness in that person, and that's why they're getting angry. Oh, so there's anger here, so there must still be residue of unworthiness. As soon as you see it, you just say, you take the program out. Seeing it, you've made it conscious, you've let it go. You've let go of the identification. And then if that person keeps reappearing, or other people and circumstances that are similar, they're just invitations inviting you back to consent to that thing that you said that you'd pulled away from. So it's the refining. Don't give up, keep going. That's the work, and it doesn't take that long, and it is effortless. It doesn't take hours and hours and hours of studying and undoing and unraveling and looking for things that happened 50 years ago. Everything's got its time and place, but if it's effortless being that you want, then that means that you are warmed to, or would like to just rest in attributeless being, which is where there's no problems, no sufferer, no right, no wrong, nothing. There's just absolutely nothing. But in resting there, in identifying with your beingness, you will very quickly experience love and intelligence, and that love has a feeling of happiness no matter what, and it's so much easier to spot the contrast. So if an invitation comes in, straight away it's spotted, and you don't get overwhelmed and identify with it. You can just use the language that, oh, that's interesting, there's an awareness of an invitation, and I decline the invitation. Or you may just go silent and just watch everything arise equally and effortlessly in the space of being. Have an amazing day. Thank you.